The Ezras Hashem, today's daf is daf Lamed Dalet. Let's just review for a second, and it's very easy to get. Most of the stuff is familiar. There's the Shita Beis Shammai. The Beis Shammai says, Beis Shammai says, hold on one second. Beis Shammai says that when a person he wants to become a Nazir, okay, and he says, I want to become a Nazir. And because I'm confident that the first animal that left my house was a black ox. Remember that? So Beis Shammai says, if they tell him, Rabbi, that only a white ox left your house, Beis Shammai says you're still a Nazir. Because Beis Shammai holds Hegdish B'ta'os is considered Hegdish. That means if you're confident in something and you just called it wrong, you called the Tanai, the condition wrong, we know that you wanted to make it something Hegdish, so it becomes Hegdish anyway. So we know that you want to be a Nazir. You were just confident that the black ox left your house. It turns out you were wrong. Beis Shammai says you would still be a Nazir. That's what we learned before. But we're going to see our Mishnah like this. A similar case. Ra'ah, if a man saw as a koi. A koi is an animal that is a mixture of a deer and a goat. A deer is a wild animal, and a goat is a domestic animal. Now we know that there is a difference between a goat and a deer. A goat is a domestic animal, and therefore the fats of the goat are not, you're not allowed to eat it. A chaya, a deer fats are permitted to eat. So deer has a kula. This is a crossbreed between a chaya and a behema. So therefore, we don't know what the din is. Is this kai has a din of a chaya or it has a din of a behema? On the other hand, when you shecht a chaya, when you shecht a wild animal, you have to do kisei hadam. You have to take earth and cover the blood that you just slaughtered. If it was an animal, if it has a din of a domestic animal, like a sheep, then you don't have to do kisei hadam. So the question throughout the Gemara was, what gender, I guess, is this koi? It's either a behema, either it's a chaya, either it's neither, either it's a neutral gender. We don't know what it is, and it was never decided in halacha. Okay, so a person says like this. Now let's get back right into it. A person says ra'a es ha-koi. If a person sees the koi, va'amar, and if one person says hareini nazir, I want to become a nazir, shezeh chaya. I'm confident that this koi has a din of a chaya, of a wild animal. And the second guy says, no, hareini nazir, I'm going to become a nazir, shezeh ein a chaya. It does not have a din as a wild animal, and therefore it's not obligated in kisei adam, but the fats are also. So guy number two says, I think it's not a chaya, wild animal. Or person number three says, hareini nazir shezeh behema. I'm a nazir that this is a behema. So he's like guy number two. Fourth guy says, hareini nazir she'ein zeh behema. I think I'm a nazir that this is not a wild animal, is not an animal. So the fourth guy is like guy number one. Okay, we just began, Louis. Okay, we're just finishing up the end of the parak of we're just finishing up. We're on Daf Lamed Dalet Omer Aleph. Okay, by the middle of the Mishnah. So now, then a person says, hareini nazir. A person says, I want to be a nazir about this koi, shezeh chaya ubehema. I think it's a bechaya and a behema. And the number six guy says, hareini nazir, I'm a nazir, she'ein zeh loy chaya v'loy behema. It's not a chaya, it's not a behema. It's something different. It's like a. And the seventh guy says, hareini nazir, she'echad mekam nazir. I'm a nazir that one of you is a nazir. Okay, that one of you of these three are going to be a nazir, which is true. Hareini nazir, one person says, she'ein echad mekam nazir, that one of you is not going to be a nazir, and that's possible too. The person that gets it wrong is he's not going to be a nazir. Hareini nazir shekulchem nazirim, and the ninth person says, I'm a nazir for all of you nazirim. So you have 9 people saying statements one after another about this koi. The first 6 say about the koi. From 7, 8, 9, they talk about the other people. So the Mishnah says, Hare Kula Nazirim, they all have a din of Nazir. Like I said, the easiest way to interpret this Mishnah is the Mishnah is like Beis Shammai, because Beis Shammai says even if you get it wrong, your intention is to become a Nazir. So if you get your condition wrong, still we go back what your intention was, and Hegdish B'tos is a Hegdish, and therefore you have a din of a Nazir. That's Beis Shammai's opinion. Comes along, but the Mefarshim explained that even Beis Hillel would agree to this, because when does Beis Hillel argue and say that I don't agree to Beis Shammai is only if it's something that could be resolved. Like I gave you the case. A guy said that I'm a Nazir if the black sheep went out of my house. And it turned out they told him it wasn't the black sheep, it was the white sheep. Then Beis Hillel says you're not a Nazir. But here, by a koi, you're making yourself a Nazir on, I think the koi is a chaya. And the other person says it's not a chaya. Well, Chachamim were never resolved this kind of question. So the even Beis Hillel would agree that when something always remains unresolved, he holds like with the opinion of Reb Shimon, we say that you're going to be a Nazir, no matter what. Albeit, since it's an unresolved question, the first 6 have a din of a suffix Nazir. From 6 to 9, they have a din like a Vadai Nazir. So the first 6 have a suffix Nazir because we don't know, it's unresolved. The guy says, I'm a Nazir, that it's a Chaya. But Chachamim weren't sure. So it's either a chaya or a behema. So he has to be a nazir, but he's a suffix nazir. But the others from 7 to 8, he's saying I'm a nazir that one of you is a nazir. Well, he's totally right. One of them is for sure going to be a nazir from the previous 6. So 7, 8, 9 are nazir and mavadai. Okay, let's just finish up the Gemara. We're on Daf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph, Sheldon, and we're just finishing up the Gemara to the end of the parah. Tanis Chada. We learned in one brisa that described that this scenario that we discussed in the Mishnah was a scenario of Tisha Nazirim. You have 9 different people that said different statements. That's how you have a possibility of this of our Mishnah, where all 9 people could be Nazirim. The Tanya Idach, but another brisa describes the scenario of our Mishnah, Tisha Nazirios, that one person is going to have 9 successive Nazirius on him. One person is going to have 9 times he has to be a Nazir. So it doesn't make sense because Bishlam Atesh Nazirim, I can understand how you could have our scenario of our Mishnah with 9 different people, because that's how our Mishnah set it up. Going to have a Gavrit Fei, you have all these numerous people. The Itvis Ba'azalba, each one is successive to the next. The first one says, I'm a Nazir if it's a Chaya. The next one says, I argue with you. I'm a Nazir if it's not a Chaya. One person said, then the third guy says, I think it's a Behema. The other one says it's not a Behema. So they're talking one after another. So each one is successive and continuing the conversation of the one before. How can you have one person accepting upon himself 9 different Naziris? Well, one of them is like number 6 says, number 7 says, Hareini Nazir she'echad mehem Nazir. I'm a Nazir that one of you is going to be a Nazir. He's talking to somebody else. Number 7 is talking to somebody else. Number 8 is also she'ein echad became Nazir. He's talking to somebody else. It's not dealing with one person. So how could you say our Mishnah could also be talking about a situation where one person is accepting upon himself 9 Naziris? So Bishlam Shis Mishkachasla. The first 6, it's possible one person said those things one after another. Avat Flas Heichem Mishkachasla. The last 3 sounds like he's talking to other people. He's not talking to himself. So he's not having a successive conversation with himself. Amar Sheshish Kagoin de Omar. It's talking about a case. Hareini Nazir Naziris Hakoil Alai. It means 9 people said all this situation, and the halacha was with 9 people. We say that they're all Nazirs. Comes along the 10th guy and he says, I want to be like all of you. So basically he's saying, I want to be like all of you. So he's taking upon himself the din from each and every one of them. So he's in a situation saying, I'm going to be like each and every one of you. And now we paskin that each one of those people, 9 people, have to keep a Nazir. So the 10th guy has to keep one for each one of them. So he's a 9-time successive Nazir on one person. Hadron Allah Beis Shammai. This ends this parak Beis Shammai. Now we move on to the next parak, and this parak is called Shloisha, and it's you're familiar with this. So let's just run into it. Till now we discussed in our Masechta how to become a Nazir. Now we're going to discuss the dinim of a nazir. Shloisha minim asurim benazir. There are three, and this is an odd word, but means there are three halachas that become prohibited on a nazir. A nazir is not allowed to do three things. The first one is hatuma, something that he's not allowed to touch a dead body. Okay, that means that's on the outside of the body. He's not allowed to touch a dead body. That has nothing to do. He's going out and touching something else. The next din of a nazir is hatiglachas. He can't take a haircut. That's on top of his body. He can't do something with his body, which means take a haircut, but something on the outside of his body. I'm just pointing out the order of the Mishnah. And b'hayoytzi min hagafen. And now he can't ingest or take inside himself anything that is extracted, any food item that's extracted from a vine. Any food item that's extracted from a vine. So we'll see, like raisins, grapes, wine. The Torah gives you the examples. If you look at the Torah, we're going to get to this pasuk. You're not going to drink wine, old wine, vinegar from old wine, anything soaked in grapes. You take grapes, put it in water. You can't drink that water. And then grapes and raisins, the Torah says you can't eat. And now the Torah also adds on pits and peels. You can't eat from a grape. So that's the chiddush. Now we say b'chol hayoytzi min hagefen mitztarfin zeh and zeh. The Mishnah says that for a kazayas, you're not allowed to eat a kazayas. A kazayas is about 1.27 ounces. So anything that is extracted from the vine is mitztaref for this isser of not eating. So, for example, raisins, grapes, wine. According to the Tanakama, I'm pointing out to you that the shear of wine that you're mechayev, and nazir is chayev, is not like kiddush that it's 3 ounces, 3.3 ounces, but it's less. It's a kazayas. A kazayas means 1.27 ounces of grapes he can't eat, and wine, 1.27 ounces of wine he can't eat. And all of them, let's say you have a half an ounce of wine, a half an ounce of grapes, and another half an ounce of raisins, let's say, or peels, they all combine for the isser. You're not chayav until you eat from the grapes of kazayas, and also the Tanakh holds it's drinking also. A kazayas is 1.27 ounces. Now we go on with Beis. Mishnah Rishayna Oimers, the earlier Mishnayos, there were earlier opinions was it's not so. It means that until you drink a quarter of a lug of wine, which you're familiar with that because that's what you drink on the Seder night and every Kiddush, you have to have a minimum of 3.3 ounces, I think. So that applies not only by grapes, not only by wine, but a nazir is not allowed to eat, let's say, 3.3 ounces of grapes. Even though grapes is a food item, and normally food items we deal with kazayas, which is less than a revius. But since the Mishnah Rishayna holds the shear for all these items is the revius, 3.3 ounces. And Rabbi Akiva agrees with the Tanakama, okay, that the shear is not revius, but the shear for everything, food and drink, is kazayas. But comes along Rabbi Akiva and says even a much more stricter than the Tanakama. He says, "Afila shara pita bayayin." Even if the nazir dipped his bread in wine, the yesh ba kadei letzarav kazayis, and within the bread, which bread is permitted for a nazir, but you take the bread with the wine and it combines for a kazayis chayev. The nazir is chayev wine is chayev for that. It's almost like you take on Friday night, you dip the bread in the chicken broth. So same idea. If he did that with his bread, so then he's chayiv, even though you have less wine in the bread. So
it's amazing, Bern.
Yeah,
I think Rabbi Akiva was in the same discussion when we were learning about tuma and how you add tuma together with pieces of bone. And wasn't Rabbi Akiva in the same discussion with that?
You always have that good memory. We learned it probably in Psachim.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna in Psachim. You're right.
And we learned tuma, and we had you add tuma,
right.
One piece here, one piece there, and I believe Rabbi Akiva was at the same discussion.
Right. You're 100% right.
Yeah.
You have a better memory than I have.
Well,
sure.
It's for certain things, only 1/1000th of what you remember, but I happen to remember that.
Beautiful. and I'm gonna look it up. Just like what you said, I think I'm gonna look it up there and remind myself. Anyway, the chayavim al yayin b'fnei atzmon, on wine by itself, v'avanovim b'nei atzmon, and just by eating grapes alone, even if you only drink wine, or you obviously they combine, but let's say you drink wine or grapes or chatzanim. Let's call chatzanim for now pits. B'fnei atzmon. If you eat, like say a kazayas or a vias of pits, yichayev. Valazagim b'fnei atzmon. If he eats the peels by itself, yichayev. Okay. Rabbi Loza ben Azariah, Rabbi Loza ben Azariah has a chiddush. Ein chayav ad sheyochel shnei chatzanim mezag. You're not liable until you eat two pits and a peel. Because look at the pasuk. The pasuk says over here that a kol yemei nizroi michartzanim, from a chartzanim is a pit vadzag to the peel lo yochel. He's not allowed to eat. So it says chatzanim is plural. You know, you're always familiar with that. With the extra yud mem makes it plural, and one peel. So what he's saying is, it seems that he's saying is that if you eat, let's say, if you eat only pits, right, you're not chayev. If you eat only peels, you're not chayev. You have to have in that mixture two pits and one peel. Maybe you don't even have to have a kazayas, but you have to have in the mixture, according to Rabbi Lazar, two pits and a peel. That's Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah's opinion. Now the Mishnah describes just languages. Elohein chatzanim, elohein hazagim. What is called chatzanim in the pasuk, and what is called zagim? They're strange words. So I touched it differently than the Mishnah, the Tanakama, but we go like Rabbi Yossi. Chatzanim, the Tanakama says elu hachitzonim. That's the outer part of the grape, which is the shell. The peel, hazagim ela pnimi. That's the inside of which is the pits. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi says a slight tita. Don't make a mistake. He says that you kizoik shel behema. You look at the bell of a behema, and apparently achitzoin, the outer part of the bell of the behema, is called zoig. Is called the zoig. Hapnimi, the inside, is called inbal, the anvil. So the chatzanim, like I've been teaching it, as the pits, and zagim is the outside, which is the bell itself, which is the ringer. So that's right. Rabbi Yossi learns what they mean. Either way, they mean the same thing. It's just the taich of what they mean. Now the Mishnah says, shloisha minim asurim b'nazer hatuma. Now there are three things that are asur on nazer hatuma, and then the Mishnah goes on, hayotzi min gefen. It has to be something that is extracted from a vine. Now, in the vine itself, technically, if you're hungry, you can eat the grapes, you can eat the leaves of a vine. There are certain also shoots that come out of a vine that are edible. So is that asur? So the Mishnah masnisen. So the Mishnah says hayotzim in the gefen and gefen atzmei loy. Whatever is extracted from the vine is asur, but the vine itself is not asur. And you can eat the leaf. You eat a leaf off a vine. You know, you don't see this, but if you go to Israel and you take a tour on a vineyard, there are leaves on that vine. So it's mashma. That's not part of the isser for nazar to eat. Masnisin the like Rabbi Lazar. Our Mishnah doesn't go like Rabbi Lazar. The Tanya Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Lazar is strict. Afila alim, even a leaf of a vine, bululavin, and small shoots that come out of the vine, which somewhat are edible, the mashma are included in that isser for a nazar. And ikad the amri la asefa. Some say that the diik that our Mishnah does not go like Rabbi Lazar is really from the end of the Mishnah. Mishnah says eino chayev ela achi yoichel min hanovin kazayis, until you eat from the grapes a kazayis. That's what our Mishnah says. So you have to eat the grape itself. That's when he's liable. Min hanovim, and from the grape, that's when, yes, he becomes liable, a nazar for eating. Mahagefen, but if he eats actually from the vine itself, gefen atzmai loy, from the vine itself, he does not become asa. Who masnisen, the like Rabbi Eliezer, our Mishnah doesn't go like Rabbi Eliezer. Tanya, we learned in Rabbi Raisa, I think it's Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Lazar says, Afila alin v'lulavin b'mashma. Even a leaf of the vine or the shoots of the vine are also included in the Issa. Now, so Rabbi Lezer is much more all-inclusive than the Chachamim. So the Gemara says, B'mai kami palgi, what is the argument? Why does Rabbi Lezer say that a nazar is also on the leaf of a vine? And the Chachamim said no. So you have to look at the psukim, and you look at the psukim, and then you'll understand what's the basis of the machlokes. The pasuk says that when you become a nazir, the Torah says, "Miyayin v'sheicha yazi." You should be separated from wine. The Torah launches right away into the details. Vinegar of new wine. The vinegar shecher means old wine. He's not allowed to drink. V'chol mishras anovim, any grape that's soaked in water, la yishta, don't drink the water. V'anovim lachim, of course, is grapes. Viveshim and raisins, dry grapes, la yaicha. So that is one pasuk. Then the Torah goes and says, all his days of Naziris, mikol asher yo'asem gefen hayayin. He's not allowed to eat anything coming from that vine. He can't, a vine that makes wine. He cannot eat anything from that. So that is an all-inclusive type of statement. The previous statement was like a detailed type of statement. Now, then the Torah gets right back into details again. Mechatzanim, from pits, vadzag, and the peels, lo yoichel. So now it's back into detail. So the Torah goes details, all-inclusive, back into the details. So let's see how the drasha is. Rabbi Lazar Dorish, Ribu Yamid. Rabbi Lazar says when the Torah does that, and it says an all-inclusive statement, and umiyat, and it minimizes, it limits that statement. So miyayin v'sheicha yazir, the Torah says from wine and old wine yazir. Miyat, that's a limiting statement, that only from wine and old wine he can't drink. Then the Torah says mikol asher yo'asem egefen, that he can't drink anything that can be made from a vine that makes wine. So that's an all-inclusive statement. Riba, it's an all-inclusive statement. Miyat v'riba, when you have a limiting statement followed by a all-inclusive statement, riba hakol, you marba everything. So you all-inclusive, everything is also to a nazir. So then if everything is also to a nazir, then let's just say the all-inclusive statement. So my riba kalmili, you're all-inclusive, everything is also to a nazir. But yet we limited the minimum thing that you could limit it, which is my miyut. Why do we limit it? Miyut shebishta, the bark itself or the wood itself of the not the leaf, which is totally unedible. Then even Rabbi Lazar says a nazir is not liable for eating something totally unedible of the vine. Rabbanan darshan like this. Rabbanan hold that a nazir could eat the leaf, even though it's edible. The Rabbanan hold that the nazir could eat the leaf because they darshan klali. Klali means a general rule, uprati, and the Torah gives you details. First, the Torah says miyayin v'sheicha yazir. He should be usher to eat, separate from wine and old wine. Prat, that's a detail. Mikol asher yasem gefen hayayin. Then the Torah says anything that's made from the vine that makes wine, klal. That's a general rule. And then the Torah gives you another detail. Merchatzan and badzad. From pits to peels he shouldn't eat. Chazer a perit. That it's a detail. So we have a detail, prat, a detail. Then the Torah gives you a klal, a general rule, a prat, and then another sample detail. So i atadan elikeina prat. So the only things that are usher to a nazir is if it's similar to the details that are quoted by the Torah. Ma prat, what the detail that's quoted in the Torah, mefirish, it says explicitly pri, it's a type of fruit, upsilis pri, and it's something that is the psilis pri means the spoils of a fruit. Like vinegar is basically spoiled wine, and the Torah says that's usher. Afkol, so we're going to include pri, any type of fruit, even if it's not ripe yet, it's included in the isser for a nazir. Upsilis pri, or something that is a spoiled fruit. Let's say it has worms in it. So you can eat it, but chasat chak, that's also for a nazir, but not the leaf, because the leaf is not a fruit. So that's why the Chachamim say not the leaf. Ima, because it's not a fruit. Ima prat mefurish prigama of kol prigama. The Gemara just asked, maybe the detail is very limiting. Maybe it has to be a complete fruit. So we can't be marba something that's not a complete fruit. Let's say something that's not ripe yet. How do you know you include something that's ripe? So Amrat, I'm going to tell you common sense. Then why did the Torah? What is the Torah leaving out that you wouldn't understand on your own? Anovim lachem iveshim. the Torah wants you to include with this the Torah gives you a sample, and now you have to include something from the sample. What are you including with the sample? You have to something that the Torah does not mention. So are you going to include that the Torah to include into the Nazir Isser another lachem v'yavation, moist grapes and dry grapes, haksive, but the Torah does use that as one of the details. Yain v'chaimitz, does the Torah mean to you should add that a nazir is also wine and vinegar? Aksive, it's explicitly written. So it must be teaching you. You should not like you want to say it's only including a fruit, but like we said earlier, that it's not only including a fruit, you have to add on something that's not written in the Torah. What's not written in the Torah? Unripened fruit and a wormy fruit. So those types of things that a nazir becomes usher to. However, you wouldn't go so far to say that the nazir is usher also on a leaf. Leaves and little shoots that come out of the vine that, even though they're edible, are not usher according to the chachamim for a nazir. One more point, and then we'll stop. If you're going to add anything, so why does the Torah interrupt? If you notice, the Torah gives you, like I said before, first the Torah starts with a detail, then gives you an all-inclusive statement, then gives you another detail. Why didn't the Torah put the details together? Why did it interrupt it with a klal? That's the Gemara's question. Since we're going to add things that are similar to the details, why does the Torah write that detail after the all-inclusive statement? So why does the Torah have that funny order? So he teaches you something, a din, and how to darshan the Torah. Teaches you anytime if you find a detail, uklal, and then a general rule. If the Torah just said a detail and a general rule, you will not add something like on your own that's similar to the detail. The Torah was specific about this detail, and then we add one little thing. The general rule will add, like, say, one thing more than the detail, but not another group of things. So you'll have an extra thing. So therefore, if it would say prat and klal, you would only add one thing. Unless it goes prat, klal, prat, that means detail, general rule, and detail, then you add much more things to it. Until the Torah adds a detail in the way that it adds a detail by the nazir. Torah gives you a detail, then get a general rule, then a detail, then you add a bunch of more things that are not written in the Chumash, which is, in our case, that we are adding things that were not written in the Chumash, which is including, let's say, an unripened grape, or a grape that's spoiled that has worms in it. Even that is a nazir chayiv. But Rabbanan hold, you won't go so far to say, I'll add a leaf, because a leaf is not a fruit. That's why the Rabbanan who darshan klal prat only darshan the fruit, but not leaves. Rabbi Lazar who says riboy, and he darshans it's a miyat, a detail, and then we have an all-inclusive statement. He ignores the detail later. It's just a limiting statement, and an all-inclusive, not an inclusive statement, but a riboy, which means an additional general rule. We say that everything is including in the Isra of Nazir, and even leaves, but the only thing that's not included is if something's unedible on the tree of the vine, then the Nazir, if he eats it, would not be chayiv, even according to Rabbi Lazar. So we'll continue with Omar Mar tomorrow, Be'ezras Hashem.
Going